Good morning, and welcome to today's webcast, Unlocking Business Potential, Key Applications of Generative AI. Before we begin, I'm going to play a brief housekeeping video.
Welcome, and thank you for viewing our webcast series. Before we begin, please keep the following in mind. You can customize how you view our presentation and interact with the presenter. For better viewing, close all other applications and turn up your speaker volume. You can adjust window size and placement or enter full screen mode using the controls at the top right of the window or dragging the bottom right-hand corner to resize. At the bottom of your screen, you'll see a series of icons that relate to a different aspect of our session. You can download a PDF of today's slides from the Slide Deck and Handouts widget. You can ask questions by typing in the Q&A window and clicking Submit. We'll do our best to answer all questions or follow up via email. If you experience technical difficulty, refresh your browser by hitting the F5 key. This presentation is not legal, investment, or accounting advice. We encourage you to seek the counsel of a professional service provider to apply this content to your specific circumstances.
I'm pleased to introduce today's presenters for Moss Adams, Loren Denherter, Managing Director, and Casey Fike, Senior Manager. Loren is a firm leader in business intelligence and corporate performance management. He helps businesses improve their processes, become more efficient, and make better decisions. Casey is a senior manager in our enterprise systems consulting practice and holds Delmo professional and technical certifications and is a certified data management professional. And with that, I'll turn it over to Casey to get our presentation started today.
Great. Thanks, Chad, and thanks everybody for attending today. I think artificial intelligence, pretty hot topic and something that we're all pretty passionate about here at Moss Adams. But kind of stepping through today, we want to talk through all of kind of what I alluded to there is just all this hype around AI and what does this mean, right, for our organizations? Give an overview of when we talk about AI, what are we kind of talking about? Again, just a very broad topic. And then kind of stepping into how do we use generative artificial intelligence within our organizations? We'll talk about what we're doing with our clients, and then also we'll talk about what we're doing internally at Moss Adams. And then finally, how do we get started? Or for all of our attendees, how do we get started using generative artificial intelligence? And I think, before we jump into it, again, kind of talked about this very new topic for a lot of people. If you do have questions or comments, use that Q&A function on your screen, right? Not sure if we'll be able to get to all of those, but we'll be able to follow up with you. But please, by all means, if you have questions, ask away. So kind of stepping into the first kind of AI hype pieces, these bold AI claims. We've heard these, and I've talked to a lot of clients, a lot of presentations around them, but hey, AI is going to take my job. And kind of let me cycle through these and kind of talk through our thoughts, but it's going to take our jobs. It's going to be smarter than humans. It's going to be smarter than everybody and go off and do its own thing. Use this and you're going to see amazing growth, and there's going to be competitive changes. I think to all of these, there is an element of truth, but I think there's a lot of exaggeration. Like the first and foremost one, which is one that I hear quite a bit, is AI is going to take my job. I don't feel like that's accurate. I think, throughout history with a lot of these technological advances, it's kind of made me more connected to my job. And here I am still. I think for this first one, it's not necessarily AI is going to take your job, but it's going to be that individual or that new hire that understands how to effectively use artificial intelligence, specifically generative AI. Those are the individuals that will likely unseat those, if you will, around using AI. So, Loren, I don't know if you have anything to add there.
Yeah, just a couple of things here. So, there's, while it does make people more productive, it's not that it will do the job. but the person that's using it might be a threat to those that don't. And this one about outsmarting humans. When you see this stuff work, it works really, really quickly and provides a lot of content. So it's kind of mesmerizing. You look at it and go like, wow. But then you have to step back and realize, it is, while it's generating this content, it's really the user. It's the person that can judge and have that intelligence back behind it. And so, we kind of wonder like, well, what drives all these bold claims? Part of it is, news and social media and all that kind of stuff. But, another big culprit here is software providers. Every software solution out there is trying to get into this AI game, and they make some pretty bold claims. And so they're driving part of this as well. And it's good just to be very pragmatic about how you listen to that.
Thanks for that. So I think kind of to your point, Loren, like we're hearing a ton. There's a lot of push. We might already be using artificial intelligence without realizing it within an organization. And the point you brought up on the earlier slide on just it generates information so fast, it's kind of leads nicely into this next slide of how should we react, right? And I think that first one, that using critical thinking skills, if I'm generating a piece of content, an article, if you will, and I'm using our generative AI solution, our internal one, as I'm generating and I'm putting that out, it still needs to be in my voice, right? I need to think through, I need to trust, but verify what information has been provided by our Gen AI solution. And then also to that point is, what are these capable of, right? I think we use it a lot for kind of text-based, right? If I think about data, I think a lot of people's minds on the call might go directly to Excel or a database table or a report generated by our ERP or a dashboard. Not to say those functionalities aren't available with these generative AI solutions, but it's largely text-based. And we'll kind of talk through that later in the in the presentation. And that next point, what do we need to be doing, right? I think we've done, previous webinar I did was around AI governance, right? Like how do we bring in artificial intelligence, whether it's generative AI, machine learning, whatever that may be, to our organization. And that's kind of thinking through our strategy around what tools, what areas can we use artificial intelligence? What tools should we be selecting? How do we secure that data, right? And I think the last point here, this has been a great jumping off point for Moss Adams is, our internal solution, we released it. We're starting to see pockets within the organization saying, hey, we're finding a really unique use case this way. Very similar to what we're offering to our clients as well. But I think this, we talked about this. We talked about the hype on the previous slide. The best kind of approach that we're seeing is getting started in a low cost, safe way. So I don't know if you have anything to add to that before we move along, but.
Yeah, just highlighting that. That's what he did here at Moss Adams. We didn't try and overthink, what are all the different ways we could use this? Rather, we just took a very simple way of bringing it in a safe internal, and then we engage everybody in it and get some, a lot of micro efficiencies add up to a lot with that.
Great. So kind of stepping through the history of AI, right? I think we've clearly been hearing about AI as of late, not necessarily a new topic or concept, right? I think the 1956 was kind of the birth of the concept of artificial intelligence at the Dartmouth Summer Research, right? So had a small number of people that work in there. Fast forward to the mid 80s, machine learning kind of took off with the backpropagation algorithm where you could train neural networks. And we're not going to get too technical on this webcast. This slide will be the most technical we get, but just thinking through how do we use neural networks to learn, take data, train those neural networks. And then fast forward to 2017, where this is the attention is all you need paper It's available to read on the internet. But that's where you started to see the explosion, where this paper helped define what this transformer model is that is now used in a lot of these large language models like ChatGPT. So you can see we started very small number of users that grew, and that tens of millions, that's probably too small of a number at this point, where we're starting to see more and more exponential growth in using artificial intelligence, easier use cases for your end user. So kind of, again, stepping through is, as I mentioned, the exponential growth. It's generative AI, again, it's been a large accelerator for me and just my day-to-day as well. But kind of to set the stage a little bit, it's text, and I talked about this a few slides ago. This is kind of text focused, right? I think there are some use cases on generating images, videos. That's not a large use case, at least for us internally. Again, it's a lot of text. Loren and I talked about this second bullet, that we're finding use cases internally, right? We started very small, low cost. Let's get this out to some of our teams. Those use cases get spurned up within those teams, and it's starting to expand. Augments work. I talked about this earlier, right? I use our internal solution every single day. It's been something that's been truly invaluable for me on just being more effective in my day-to-day on, we'll talk about use cases later. And I think that fourth bullet there is safe, right? I think, the concept of data, if we're using public GPT or large language models like ChatGPT, if I send information, whether that's text or an Excel upload, that data is retained by ChatGPT. It's further trained on further releases of ChatGPT. So my data, if I send it to a public LLM, like I said, ChatGPT or Copilot, that data is retained. Whereas with our solution and what we can offer, your data stays your data. So Loren, I don't know if you have anything to add there before I pass it back to you, but.
Yeah, just a couple of items there. I really want to highlight the word augment. It is meant to be, to be a participant in the conversation or in the workflow. But you have to remember, it is a non-accountable participant. The only one that's accountable in that conversation is the user. So it's really important that people keep their, quote, hands on the steering wheel. But the second part of that is that last bullet kind of reiterating, is it going to take our jobs? No, it's going to help us be more productive and other people come in. Your future workforce are going to expect this. So just earlier in the year, talking to higher ed institutions, they were all trying to figure out how to keep it out. And within the span of 8 months, they've all done a 180-degree turn, and they're all embracing it, saying, yeah, our students will have to do a lot more work, but they need to learn how to use these tools because that's what they're going to compete with in the future. You want to be able to attract that talent in, and you don't want that talent to be a threat to your current workforce. And so, just kind of emphasizing, there is a low-cost way to get started and to make it available so that you can become familiar in your organization.
Well said.
Very good. Yeah, so just to go through a bit here about just, how do we go about using this AI? So generative AI, and as Casey was pointing out, for the most part, we're very focused on large language models like ChatGPT. That's an example of that. And this is just, a summary of the kind of things that you can do. So we're talking about content generation. That can be, content for anything from an email to an article. It's just you put in a prompt, you ask it to do something, and then it generates this content that comes back. But at the same time, you can also supply the information like documents and transcripts of calls and things like that, and ask it to summarize. And it does a fantastic job of that, of taking that and put it into everyday language, and then you can chat with it and ask it questions about the content that's in there. Very similar to the number 3 there, where you can interpret and evaluate. You can take data and like if let's say you have a questionnaire and has some open-ended questions on it and you get a bunch of responses back, you can take those responses, feed into the model and say, what is some sentiment analysis around the responses coming back and what are some key elements of that? And it'll go through and pull that forward for you. And then knowledge search, these LLMs are trained on vast amounts of information. And so you can query it on different subjects. And we'll get into a little bit about how you go about these queries so that you can narrow into a subject and you chat and kind of build this conversation around it. And then, of course, there's translation. I think the last count was 53 languages. That is changing all the time. It does an amazing job at translation. So that's just kind of generally what these models can do. From a business perspective, here are the things that we're really finding are real business value. So again, you can start in on this at a very low cost and do things like this. So you can have this content augmentation. So, if you're having to produce something like, even as simple as a monthly newsletter, that can be, turned into a bit of a chore, just, like drumming up the content and making it sound in a certain voice. So you can ask these models to do that. You don't want that to be the content that goes out. You want it to augment your work so that it expands the conversation. Then you can say, okay, great. That's a great expansion of the conversation. Now let me put my voice on it. Policy accessibility. This is one we're finding is super helpful. So any kind of either policy or technical manuals, kind of all in the same group here. You probably have those out on, a file folder on your network somewhere or in SharePoint, at least documents that are out there, and they can be a bit of a chore to access and to find the specific information for the position that you're in at that time or the situation that you're facing at the time. You can adjust all of that into these models and then just make them chattable. So it means that the person on the front line can just ask a question about their situation and have a look into the policy and the technical manuals and say, like, here is content, and you can chat about the nuances of that. Kind of, taking it to other sides. So where do those policies come from? Often they're about compliance with some regulation, some rules, etc. You can get that set of rules and you can get the policies that they're supposed to represent and have it do an assessment across there and find, here are things that are done well, here are things that are a little sketchy, and maybe some stuff that's missing altogether, and do that in a way that you can see what those results are and guide a person through that assessment and that audit. And then internal operating knowledge. If you have documents or if you have people that know things, that have institutional knowledge, and you want to get that in, you can talk with them, put it into a transcript, and then bring that into the model and take all these technical manuals, bring them into the AI as well, and make that chattable. So you can just have, everybody can just have these conversations with these things. And so similar to that, or closely related, is this, customer interaction. So we've all interacted with bots. That's kind of unpleasant. We've also interacted with people that know your company, but they don't know the specific question that you're asking. But you put these two things together. So if you have the person with the machine that's helping to keep it all in context, that's a great experience. And that, 9 times out of 10, that's a good experience. That's what these language models can do here. This is just a quick example of like an internal platform. So it behaves basically the same as an external public platform, but it protects your data. So you can have a number of different conversations going. You can ingest a ton of data into it and have it respond back and be able to have everybody in an organization have this capability and bring them up into and let them think about how they do their work in an augmented kind of way. And then here's another example here of taking a policy and having it go through regulatory compliance, where you have a prompt at the top that's saying that you want it to look at a particular regulation, and here's the policy that goes along with that. What is an assessment? And you see what it brings back is It gives you kind of an overview what that assessment is, strengths of what is there in your policies, and then weaknesses, like what is missing. And as it turned out, for a person going through something that's very language intensive, it is kind of mind numbing to see, like all this text and then find out like what's missing. That's kind of a hard thing for a person to do. But this, like in less than a minute, just like goes right through that. It organizes the work in a way that somebody can then take and look at the output of this and say, okay, I've got a great starting point and I've got an auditable thing because I can say, here's what was the suggestions, and I can go back and look through all of this and see, with my own thinking, what do I think about what this is saying and what should be changed? And so it helps augment that piece of it. And then just to kind of summarize how this that piece all fits together, it's a workflow. So you kind of think about doing this work in a different way. So from the very start, you can use AI to assist and accelerate what is that assessment and produce results that somebody that can look at. But then once you can look at it and they say like, yeah, for sure, I want to change X and Y. AI will also help expand that content, take the work out of putting all of that together, and then all of those results can be saved away so that you have this auditable thing. You can go back and see what were the decisions that were made and store that away. And then lastly, now that you have better policies or procedures or technical manuals, whatever it is that you're working on there, then that can be served up clear to the front line. Everybody can do this with AI in a chattable kind of way. My specific situation, the nuances of the thing that I'm dealing with, and chat with that and have it come back and respond in a way that a person can interact with. So all of this that we're describing here is, just interacting with these large language models. And that interaction comes in the form of what we call prompts. So that's that box that is kind of there at the, the bottom of the screen. If you're on ChatGPT, that's, where the user puts in their content. And so it's not like a search. So a search in Google, what you're doing is you're trying to like hit that keyword, doing that specific thing, or a specific phrase or term that's going to get back the search results. This is different than that. These models are meant to just talk away. And so you want to give it persona, like who do you want the model to behave as? Is it like an executive, like a professor, like a person on the street? And then give it some content to work with. I'm thinking about, these general situations, and then here's some specific things about that, what I'm thinking about. And this is why I'm doing it. And I want the output to look like either a table or some paragraphs. So you tell it all of this stuff, then they behave really well. So that's a way that you can guide. So this prompt engineering here is a really key part of that. I don't know if Casey, you wanted to add to that or not.
Yeah, no, I think the way prompt engineering is kind of evolving, right? I look at that as that's going to be the true tech skill set, I think, going forward, right? I think the SQL query, basic Excel functions from a while ago, it's who can effectively learn how to prompt or execute effective prompts with these large language models is going to be the new kind of hot skill, if you will, for people coming up in this. So,
yeah, very good. So this generative AI, having an augmentation. So again, it is not an accountable participant, but it can generate content like none other. So that speed and breadth of that content. But you have to remember, it's kind of mesmerizing what it puts out there, and it speaks with some authority. You have to have your critical thinking skills have never been more important than now. And so that usage and the safety part, you really have to have both sides of that for it to be effective and safe inside of the organization. So just, a bit of some overview here. It is interactive chat. It is meant to be conversational, very wordy. And you can ingest a ton of information. And again, this is not high cost. You can bring in a ton of information and make that chattable to the organization. But it's not a search engine. It is not meant to come back as with just a few little keywords and whatnot. It actually talks with you. And then, but the user must vet. It'll talk with some authority and be off the rails. And so the person needs to not only guard for that, but if you're putting content out, you'll need to just be able to look into what you're seeing on the screen and see if there's any intellectual property or other things that need to be cited if you have that kind of content coming in as well. Risks and pitfalls. We always like to have a balanced conversation around this AI usage. Yes, it is very, very powerful, but just beware, at all times. And there's two parts to that. We talk with some organizations to say, like, well, we haven't really decided, where we want to go with our AI policy. And we'll say, believe it or not, to a T, every organization we've talked with, there's what we call our shadow AI usage going on. There are employees out there using it, whether you have a policy or not. The problem is they're using it on public sites. And many people aren't aware that that is being trained into the next model. So you have internal information unwittingly being leaked out and can come up in the next model should somebody search on that. And so we just say, get in front of it in a low-cost way to say, here's something, we're making it available to everybody, kind of raise everybody up to be able to use that. The other flip side of that is when people start to use it, is just really emphasize you need to put on your critical thinking hat all the time with it. Don't take your hand off the steering wheel. Use it for sure, but vet the results. I don't know, Casey, if you wanted to add to that.
No, I think I'll kind of move it along if that's okay, but just kind of talking through how to get started, right? And what we're looking at here, this is the approach Moss Adams took internally to get started, right? So we had a team. I remember you and I talking through this when this was launched, but had a team, internal champion that had built this, and that internal use case and choosing the AI platform, those were melded together, right? I think there was, how do we keep our data safe, but allow Moss Adams employees the ability to use this technology? And that's what we were able to build internally and do that. And that started with an internal chat. And then as we started working internally, again, it was very small, but then we started slowly interacting with other teams. And we've been doing this, Loren, is reaching out to other practices within Moss Adams and just saying, here's how we're using it. And that's starting to build these unique use cases, right? We've talked about prompt engineering. We have a lot of people saying, sharing prompts. Here's how I did this. Here's how I did that. So that kind of gets into that continuous improvement where we're sharing, but just, again, starting very small. So again, segueing into here's how we're helping our clients. Providing an internal GPT. Loren showed a couple of slides about that earlier. Again, we have a GPT that we can offer to our clients that keeps their data right. And I think for me personally, it's always about the data and keeping that safe, but allowing teams, organizations, and companies to use this internally. Start small, very cost effective, keep your data. We're also helping clients upload policies and procedures, Loren, that you talked about earlier, where if I want to make a self-service mechanism for my team, we can take your proprietary information, load that up again into your own internal GPT, and then your internal team can start using that. Support, maintenance, workshops, training, again, the prompt engineering, how do we effectively use this? These are things that we're offering our clients. Again, this is not breaking the bank. It's a very kind of straight, small cost. So again, I'm trying, I know we're running short of time, but I'm trying to get through this. But again, very early in this generative AI space, where we are today is this newest model here where we have ChatGPT just released this. but it now has the ability to reason with someone at a PhD level, right? So we're at level kind of 2 of phase 5. Again, it's moving quickly. Again, I know, apologies to kind of burn through that last slide, but to tie it all back together, you don't have to break the bank to get started, right? Do what we did. Keep your data safe, a low-cost model, and then expand on those use cases. Again, we've talked about this, the second bullet, but this is a great way to make data information out there available to everybody. And then your future workflows force. This is something kids that are in college or you're starting to hire, they're using this, as Loren said earlier, with the higher ed comment he made. This is something the workforce of the future is going to be expecting. So the best idea is to get started today. Again, low cost, keeping your data safe. Loren, I don't know if you had anything to add to that. And I do know we're right at time.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, no, just appreciate everybody's time and attention here. It's just, it's exciting, it's powerful, and it is very accessible as well.
All right. Thank you, Casey and Loren, for a great presentation today. If we didn't have time to answer your questions, we'll do our best to follow up with you after the webcast. Here's a link to an online survey where you can provide feedback for today's presentation. Please take a moment to complete this, as your feedback is very important to us. Thank you for joining us today, and we hope you'll join us again next time.
Thank you.